Welcome to the Regeneration Collective podcast, the next UN Visions for a Regenerative Future. I'm Silke von Brockhausen, a UN insider with 18 years across more than a dozen UN missions and founder of the Regeneration Collective. As the UN approaches its 80th year and the campaign for the next Secretary General gets underway, amid protracted conflicts, widening inequalities, and cross-planetary boundaries, we ask, how can the UN become the platform through which people, institutions, and the more than human world repair and transform broken systems and create conditions where life can thrive? In each episode, we speak with regenerative practitioners, policy shapers, indigenous knowledge holders, peace builders, culture makers, and frontline humanitarians about the lived experiences and visions that could translate into regenerative UN policies, organizational culture, and operations. This is for UN staff, partners, member states, and bridge builders who are curious about what regeneration means in practice and who are ready to turn the UN into a trailblazer for this shift. Today, we are joined by Eduard Müller, rector and founder of the University of International Cooperation, UCI, in Costa Rica. Since 1994, UCI has pioneered transdisciplinary and regenerative education, graduating nearly 6,000 students across 60 countries. Eduard is recognized as a global trailblazer for regenerative development, integrating economic, social, cultural, environmental, political, and spiritual dimensions into a holistic approach to today's planetary crisis. His initiatives include Regenerate Costa Rica, the Savory Hub for Costa Rica, and global collaborations with the Capital Institute and Donut Economics Action Lab. With over 40 years of experience across 50 countries, Eduard has worked in higher education, NGOs, corporations, UN agencies, governments, and indigenous communities. A veterinarian by training, he shifted to regeneration, climate, biodiversity, and landscape restoration with deep engagement in UNESCO biosphere reserves, biodiversity conference of the parties, COPs, and local communities. Eduard reminds us, the only way to have a livable planet is if we regenerate it. He brings both wisdom and practical experience to help us rethink how we relate to soil, food, culture, and life itself. Welcome to the podcast, Eduard.
Thank you, Silke, for inviting me. This is a great opportunity and a great pleasure to be able to talk with you and see how we get one of the biggest, most important organizations in the world to actually lead on this process to create a future for us.
Exactly, that's the vision. And for that, I'm so grateful to have you here to share your wisdom and hopefully plant some seeds across the UN. So my first question for you is, what does regeneration mean to you and why is it so essential at this point in history?
So for me, it's very simple. And actually, it fits to everything, which is we need to create conditions for life. So regeneration is creating conditions for life. And this is all life. We are part of nature. We are not the owners of nature. And we have grown tremendously in numbers, and nature has declined at an exponential speed in numbers. So whatever project we do, be it development project, be it political project, be it a construction project, it has to create conditions for life. So sustainability, the definition is 1987. And it was to leave future generations the same conditions that we got. We mortgaged the planet. We are not leaving conditions for these future generations. And if you look at the planetary boundaries approach, we have exceeded most of the limits to the planet to be able to keep us alive. So it's called the safe operating space for humanity. So sustainability is not anymore possible. And that's a reality, looking at the numbers. If we look at my region, Latin America, it's the most biodiverse region in the world. We've lost 95% in 2020 of the abundance of biodiversity. People don't understand what is abundance of biodiversity. I asked them, when was the last time you scraped your windshield to get the insects off? And ecosystems function based on abundance, not on species. So the science is so reductionist, and our institutions are reductionist. We have a Ministry for Environment, which is always opposing the Ministry for Agriculture. It should be joined. It has to be an integrated approach. I used to work with a lot with protected areas, and I would say the best future we can envision is not having to need protected areas. That we recognize that that space for nature is vital for us to keep it alive. So sustainability is not possible anymore. We first have to regenerate the planet, and regeneration is creating conditions for life.
And the big question, Edward, how do we do that? Where do we start?
We start, there are several important things. One of the most important things is recognizing that we are nature. It's not us and nature, it's us, our nature. We are nature. That is key. And nature has been separated from Western science, from Western culture for at least over 500 years. Whereas now we're admiring the indigenous populations because they're still in nature. Not all of them, but a lot of them are still understanding that we are part of nature. That is number one. Two, we need to move drastically away from the reductionist approach. So I myself, I believe in science. I'm coming from a scientific background. I did work with the white gown and the glasses and microscopes and all that. But definitely the peer-reviewed process makes you focus on very small things, and we do not have the ability to understand complexity. So nature's complex. It's not complicated. It's complex. And the problems are complex, and we will not solve, and we have not solved anything over the last, let's say, we're going to take 92 as a ground basis of the Rio summit. 30 some years, we have not changed anything. Why? Because we have the disciplinary approach. So we need to unlearn, which is the third one, very important and very difficult. People do not like to unlearn, especially since, I studied so many years in the best university in the world, and I was with the best teachers in the world. Well, economists are still thinking that GDP is a magic wand, and GDP increases when disaster increases. We're going to see GDP increase tremendously over the next years with all these wars, all the climate catastrophes, everything else. GDP is going to go up. GDP goes up, the more people we have in prison. So we're still working on that. We are still teaching, and many very important universities are still teaching their students to put poison on the food we're going to eat and to kill everything else around that. And we're seeing unintended but well-known impacts from these chemical companies because they knew about it. It's not like glyphosate is not acutely toxic. Yeah, but they knew for years that it was chronically toxic, long-term exposure. So the unlearning process is fundamental. And if we don't do this, we will keep on inventing wrong solutions. So I just want to give one example. We know the planetary boundaries. The people who have not seen them, go and look them. They were published for the first time in 2009. Biodiversity loss was number one, followed by fertilizer use. Two low-hanging fruits. We can regenerate biodiversity quickly. And if you don't believe me, look what Mother Nature responded to us in the 4 months we were locked up. Nature sprouted all over the place. Like Mother Nature was saying, I'm still resilient. Everywhere we saw the Mediterranean come back with life. We saw cities like Beijing being able to look around and not see the smog. Our coasts here, since I don't know why the government prohibited fishing and people going out on the beaches, but the fish stocks recovered in 4 months. So nature is still like saying, I've warned you many times. I gave you climate change. I gave you sea level rise. I gave you floods. I gave you fires. You didn't pay attention. Here's a little present. Think about it. You won't even be able to see it, but it will keep you on your knees for at least a couple of years. And that's what happened. That's what COVID is for me. And we didn't learn. We decided to build back better. And this is UN terms. Build back better. And yes, we accelerated the destruction. Part of it for me is the current system, call it establishment, call it whatever you want to call it, is like a person that's drowning. and somebody comes to save him, and he'll push that person down to keep on living for a few minutes more instead of letting go and being rescued. So this is where I'm thinking that we are. So we need to really rethink everything. Those planetary boundaries, the whole world, and the UN especially, politicians, technical agencies for cooperation are focused on reducing CO2 emissions, net zero, all that. I hate to say it, and I worked for many years with that apocalyptic talking. CO2 is not the issue. And if you don't believe me, a good friend of mine, Larry Copel from the Carbon Underground, always says none of what we're seeing today has ever been caused by future emissions. So what are we doing focusing on reducing future emissions? And I always say CO2 is our best ally. It's the fuel that will allow nature to bring carbon from the sky and put it beneath our feet. CO2 is the machine for that. So plants need CO2 to produce sugars to feed the mycelium and get the carbon into the soil. It's not about planting trees. And everything is about planting trees today. And trees are burning. The forests are burning. That CO2 is being released. And I cannot believe we're still stuck in the carbon tunnel vision where all this money is being poured in to regeneration or restoration projects which have nothing to do with restoration because all their metrics are canopy carbon and estimating underground carbon in the root system. And they call that restoration. So we need to reinvent everything, looking at it under a holistic approach. Science is beautiful. We need to see what really has to be kept of that. We have advanced a lot. But if we do not transition into understanding complexity, and that is understanding how Mother Nature works, we won't be able to solve the complexity of the problems we have.
Wow, you opened a lot of different perspectives here, and I would like to hear more about all of them. What just came up is, a lot of the problems you're also describing, it's around tribal mindset that we have, that we just look around what's happening maybe in our nearest environment or maximum in our country. We don't look at the global system itself that is actually required to be changed. We look in short-term visions, like we look only as far as maybe the next election cycle goes. And I think this all is contributing to this. Also, the fact that a lot of us believe that we don't have agency, that we as individuals can't do anything about the situation you're describing. What would you say about that? I feel all of us are envisioning a better future that you're describing, and everybody wants that. We have the solutions. You have already also mentioned the science around it. What can be done to also get people contribute to these solutions and get them out of this apathy that I feel a lot?
I worked for several decades in communicating climate change. I even worked with Al Gore for 3 years in his project to let the world know that we are in climate change. And eventually I came across Buckminster Fuller and read his recommendation. If you want to change a system, don't fight it. Build a new one that will make the old one obsolete. So I wasted many years of my time talking to presidents. I've had lunch with Evo Morales and Lula. I've gone to national congresses. I have these medals from the National Congress of Argentina. I worked with local provincial congresses, ministers, you name it. The impact, well, a little bit. Saved several 100,000 hectares in Argentina from turning into soybean. But that's not the solution. So the only way I've found to help make this change is by demonstrating that it works. So we tried to change farmers to not use chemicals. And in COVID, here in the province of Guanacaste, where I live, which is basically depending on tourism. Tourism was shut down. There was no food. Only one little place that's a bit higher produced food. I'm talking about vegetables. So we went there and talked to the farmers. They said, no, I'm not going to take the risk of not putting chemicals because then I'm going to lose my produce. So we went to the technical school where their kids study, and we taught them regenerative agriculture for a year. And then we told them to get back to their parents and ask for a little piece of land. After 6 months, several of those parents were shifting to regenerative. Why? The kids produced better food. The chefs went to buy that food in their farms for their restaurants. And they didn't spend 40% of their income subsidizing Bayer and all these other chemical companies. So the net was positive. The health was positive. Farmers, small farmers are aware that all this is killing life around them very quickly. Birds, insects, bats, which are all necessary for the ecosystem function. I'll give you another example. Everybody says we need to kill the cows to save the planet. That is reductionist. That's a wrong science. And yes, as a veterinarian, I understand that permanent grazing in large scale, like in Brazil, Brazil is now changing, but in areas where they're cutting down forests to put cattle, it's very destructive. But holistic grazing, and this is not new. Alan Savory has been talking about this for 50 years plus, and we've done it. And I actually managed to sell the first carbon project to the carbon market to fund cattle to bring biodiversity back and avoid climate change and bring back water. It's too long to explain here, but basically, when you have a rotational grazing, you allow the plant to develop as nature wants it. It can feed the mycelium underground. It feeds the nitrophile bacteria. What a stupidity. And it came from the military. They had so much nitrogen after the war, then they convinced people that it was a fertilizer. No, nitrogen is the most abundant element in the atmosphere. And these bacteria that fix nitrogen grow in the roots and the mycelium and capture that nitrogen free of charge. When did you see a forest needing fertilizers? So it's just going back to understanding how nature works. And this allows us to concentrate the area, double or triple the production for the farmer. So it's a win for the farmer because he's getting more money. And we're asking him to give back between 5 and 30% of his farm for biological corridors. Those corridors are being set up, are being regenerated or restored. I prefer to use the word regenerate in the areas where water used to flow. When I was a kid, the rivers were here flowing all year round. And now it rains, and 10 minutes later, it's gravel and no water. So by bringing biological connectivity along these water lines, we are harvesting more water. Here on this farm, now we can see even shrimp and fish come back to the canals, which we unstraightened them and created conditions for the water to be retained. That makes the water go into the aquifer, and in our dry season, we'll still have water in the wells. So it's so simple. Understanding nature, and nature is simple. It's complex, but it's at the same time very simple. And if you learn biomimicry and look at how nature, just have to learn. A farmer does not need the MRV, the monitoring, reporting, and verification process. That's for UN. That's for the investment market. The farmer can see his soil go from red or yellow to black in 2 years. That's what he needs. A wisdom holder, which I work with, or he actually works at the university, he always says, our campesinos, the rural farmers, need the permaculture without the yoga. Okay? So that is what we have to focus on. We can actually bring back. So in the food farms that we created during COVID, where people didn't have what to eat, we produced 10 tons of food per month per hectare. That's more than any chemical. And these are families that did not have training in agriculture. But after a year, we had increased 20-fold the populations of insects. We brought back insects, and then the birds coming in and the bats coming in, because there was all this food produced. And the regular agronomists that came from national universities and from the Ministry of Agriculture said, you guys are crazy. Are you feeding insects? Is that what you're doing? Well, it so happens that after a year, over 90% of the insects were good insects that were predating the bad insects. So we got an ecosystem to function which produced more food than ever, no chemicals, no pesticides, no fertilizers. We brought back conditions for life. And I remember going back 2 months after we started in degraded soil, completely degraded soil, which had been used for cattle for hundreds of years and then abandoned. A mother came and she told me, look, Edward, look how their eyes are shining again. Look at the skin. You can touch it now. It's not scaly. After 2 months of good nutrition. So it's a win-win-win. If we want to cure chronic disease, it's not with medicine. I got rid of my diabetes just by eating correctly.
Inspiring and beautiful examples of how simple the regeneration of our planet could be, and yet we're still not doing it. And I would like to hear from you, since you've also been involved in a couple of UN processes and you know the organization. And I personally know that there are already some of the permaculture projects happening through FAO, WFP. They have a regenerative advisor who's doing incredible work. But beyond that, beyond also agriculture and food systems, what is the role of an organization like the UN? What could it be if it would fully embrace regeneration? And how could we push this agenda through a platform like the UN? What would need to happen?
To say that in a few minutes, that's a big challenge.
You have 8 minutes left.
Yeah. Look, we just need to realize that it is not further technological development. It's climate smart agriculture. Yes, that's okay. And there are enough people working on it. But that's not what farmers need to make food be there. We need food safety. We need abundant food production while we recover nature, while we recover economies. So it has to be regenerative economics. And there are good examples. John Fullerton, Kate Rayworth, all these people
Mhm.
are doing brilliant stuff. BioFi project now is showing how we can actually fund all of this. We need probably the most critical one. And this is where the UN, I don't know how, because it's all separate. This will probably be landed in UNESCO and nowhere else. Culture is the most important aspect. For Europeans or for the West, culture has to do with money. It's buying art, it's going paying for an opera. It's all about that. Whereas in the global South, culture is identity. It's the glue that holds communities together. And it has been dismantled by all these brands and the consumerism, which comes from the West, all this plastic stuff, all this, buy to be happy. And on top of that, it just has been washed out now with networking. I mean, the Facebooks and all these social media, which are just dismantling, disorganized, separating the population. So it's easy to govern if you don't have a culture that joins you and makes you resilient. Here in Costa Rica, this current government has defunded education and defunded culture and defunded environment. Why? Because those are the three building blocks for democracy. And if you defund them, then you can have your authoritarian approach and say, I'm going to save this. We're going to build now a mega prison to control insecurity. My gosh, the criminal development comes from exclusion. As you grow GDP, the Gini index grows. So if we want to get rid of prisons and look at Northern Europe, we need to educate, we need to give conditions for people to be included. So we need to bring in a different vision, probably a different structure, and it will take time. We don't have to do it from one day to another, but we have to consider that an environmental impact assessment today is legal, but it's immoral because it authorizes you to lessen the damage you're doing to communities' environment. Whatever project is being done today has to create conditions for life, human and other life. So it is a very big change. And it's not going to be an easy one, but it's just focusing on those things that actually create conditions for life. And electric cars are not creating conditions for life.
What would you see as the role of the UN in this, and how could it get to this place to support a
We
more
need
healthy culture?
we need to show that regeneration is possible. So by supporting projects around the world, which it already does, but in regeneration, showing that it is viable, economically viable, production is increasing, culture is recovering, people are starting to work together instead of fighting, and bring all those to showcase, bringing them to the light. So we have so many excellent projects around the world which are doing regeneration. Nobody knows about them except the people that went to visit or by chance fell upon them. So networking all these examples and turning it into a movement. And by re-educating, AI is going to kill a lot of the people, a lot of professions. So we need to offer youth the hope that their effort should go into building a future for themselves. And that is by bringing nature back, bringing them back as nature. So by instead of just educating kids in STEM, we need to educate them in the wrongly called soft skills, which are the most critical skills. That's what kids will need. So we need to reinvent education. We need to re-strengthen the cultural agriculture. It's not about food. It's about a culture that brings you in contact to the land, and that evolved humanity. Their relationship with the land created their food, created their customs, created their traditions. That was killed by the chemical green revolution. So we need to re-strengthen those ties, the bonds with people in their land, even in cities. Biophilic cities is another opportunity. But it's not project-based, it's a movement-based. So instead of doing little projects all over, or bigger projects all over, we need to bring the projects that are there, support these people, and give the education that is required. We need to re-educate people.
The UN could be this platform that connects and that
Clearly,
showcases prototypes, that supports this kind of policies across governments. I believe that for an organization to promote regeneration, it needs to be regenerative itself, because we need to walk the talk that we believe in. Do you have any thoughts on how to trigger this kind of transformation inside the organization too, which is currently not so much regenerative as we discussed in the beginning? It doesn't look always at what promotes most life. It requires an internal organizational change, mindset change. What have you seen examples how this can happen, and what would it look like inside the UN?
you know, you can go to an extreme level. We did it at the university. Our first chair in the university council, the board, is Mother Nature.
Mhm.
And before we sign up on any action in the future, we need to ask Mother Nature if it's going to harm her or if it's going to be good for her. That's an extreme. The other thing is start looking at bringing all the different knowledge sources and really working on that. We have the knowledge dialogue, which is now becoming popular, but it's not going and copying the indigenous knowledge. It's inbreeding it with the scientific knowledge. I'm not against science, but reductionist science has done us more harm than good. We are in this mess because of the university. It's the universities that developed the 4,000 chemicals that are being put into food now. It's the universities which started the Green Revolution. It's the university we started the new medicine, which does not respond to nature. We don't cure with chemicals. We need to cure by curing our gut, by curing our relationship with nature, by curing the soil microbiome. We have all these experiences to revert Alzheimer, cancer, all these things come from better nutrition, and that comes from better soil. So food density, instead of working on tons per hectare, let's talk about kilograms of nutrient density per product. So a regenerative tomato is equivalent probably to about 20 organic tomatoes and probably about 50 chemical tomatoes. So with one tomato, you satisfy your nutritional needs. That is how we should measure development. That's how FAO should measure success in agriculture, and not tons per hectare. which are not contemplating the degradation of soil, which has a cost. Rebuilding that soil cost. That should be built into the equations. And we need to reinvent the economic system. And we have enough examples. Donut economics, large scale, John Fullerton, all these other people working on, they're there.
Mm.
Ask how much support they've gotten from the UN. Ask them how much, I won't say fights, friction, but the system, current system, I mean, I was called to do the presentation at Riyadh for the COP16, the desertification one, and they asked me, Edward, we need to bring soil and regeneration into the conventions. Can you do that, please? I had said I wouldn't go back to COPs. I did it. And how, after so many years, is soil not in the planetary boundaries approach? And how is soil not the best solution? Instead of electric cars, it's soil. It's getting carbon from the sky. That's how nature did it. The 60 million bison in the Central Plains in the US, those were the richest carbon soils in the world, which were destroyed by chemical agriculture. But we can bring this back if every regenerative project, every food project, every development project creates conditions for life. We can revert this. If you give me the support to turn all existing cattle into holistic grazing, and this is not for me, there are several publications in this, we would actually be capturing more CO2 per year than what the global economy releases. And that carbon would be put into the soil. So we could be fixing 43 gigatons of carbon every year by regenerating the cattle, and another 18, I think it's 12 gigatons through regenerative agriculture. So there alone, we could be fixing 150% of global emissions, which are now about 38 gigas, around there. Every year, we could be fixing all of that plus 50% more and put it into the soil. And that's so simple and doesn't require billions of dollars. Why don't we do this? Because we have to unlearn. There's still too many people thinking we have to kill the cows to save the planet.
I love the passion that you bring to the table and also the conviction that it's possible. And despite all the complexity, I can still sense so much hope in you and so much energy to do the change. So let's assume you would become the next Secretary General on the 1st of January 2027. You would be in charge of over 30 UN institutions and 130,000 staff and have an administrative role, but quite influential as Secretary General. What would be your agenda for the first 100 days as the Secretary General?
This might sound funny, but I'd put all of those people through a short course in biomimicry to understand how Mother Nature works and to
Mm.
understand that we are nature. Once you go through that and you can see the examples, and I'd start by bringing in together all these success stories and
Mm.
sending all these people, which are all around the world, to look at the success stories in their region. They don't even have to fly miles across in first class to go and see that. They can see it
Mm.
there. And we make these things visible. And we start supporting these initiatives, which are already in process. So we don't have to jumpstart it. We don't have to put all the money into, we just have to give them visibility and get a communication across. So
Mm.
we're not fighting the system. We're building a new paradigm that will make the old one obsolete. And that you do by showing how it works. All these cultural projects, I mean, Medellin has them. You go to any city today and they have these cultural rescue projects. Mexico has them.
Mm.
Why is it that they are always working in poverty? A bit of support, and even if it's only visibility to the companies, to the people who have the money, making these things visible as this is what we need. We need
Mm.
to engage as a community. All the media has been separating, and we see countries with politicians that they want to divide because then it's easy to govern. If we change this around and get UNESCO, for example, to bring culture, nature, and people just in one vision and start strengthening the cultural ties to the land, the development in the future will be bioregional. It won't be centralized in central governments have no clue the fourth floor of a glass building what a community needs. So the UN they supported us with the local Agenda 21s, and we did that in the 90s and early 2000s. Then that was eliminated. Getting people to plan their future, getting local people to get involved in planning their future, getting the youth with hope. Look, you want a future? It's not learning how to code, because coding will be done by AI. It's bringing nature back and living in nature, and that's not only soil and plants and insects, it's you. So why do you want to live on a treadmill if you can actually live enjoying life more? So UNESCO has the instruments for that. They have the youth. We have the Earth Charter. We have all these organizations, but they're all doing separate things. We need to unite it. So I'd get all of these leaders together and get FAO to bring back agriculture. And that not being in a separate office in Paris and the other one in Rome that have no connection.
Yeah.
And the people in Rome only think of tractors and how to optimize irrigation systems. That's not it. Getting the people in economics to understand the SDGs, they're very top down. How do we invert them? How do we go to the ground and not reinvent? So we have to lose that neocolonialistic approach and empower the local people to show. And maybe they fail, but the majority will succeed. And those that are succeeding need to be made visible. And those are the ones that should be used to train. A lot of solutions won't come from a top university with a $60 billion endowment. This will come from the ground. So it's just shifting the focus from an elite pyramid structure to a horizontal structure that actually feeds and supports all this energy that's coming from the ground up. All these movements, youth movements that are doing this. Let's just support them and not ignore them, not make it more difficult. I mean, to run a project, sometimes with the UN or the European Commission, it's so much paperwork. And it's just to feed the recording for those people, but it doesn't really help our farmers. So we need to do a big shift, and I know it would take time, but I think now that we're seeing the collapse of our civilization, it's not just environment collapse. It's political, it's economic, and the whole. So we're in a wake-up call, and by 2030, we will be in a different place unless we start changing. And I think now people have realized finally that GDP growth is not bringing them happiness, that malls and consumption by the tons is not bringing happiness, especially with the programmed obsolescence of the products. That is not making people happy. People aren't happy. We're seeing kids' suicide rates going up. We need to give kids hope. And if we can do that and start moving away from the technical mind to understanding that leadership, negotiation, conflict resolution, cooperation instead of competition is the key for these kids, then we might. And we have a program where we're bringing Mother Nature as a teacher into schools. Why? It's fundamental to reconnect kids with nature. They cannot grow up looking at screens. So it's a whole circle of things, but we need to educate. And is the biggest challenge. How do we re-educate all these people so they can unlearn and be open and connect their consciousness? When I talk about regeneration, I talk a direct connection of nature with spirituality. And with other universities and provosts and rectors, they say, oh, that's for religion department. No, it's not. It's that deep consciousness that we are a family. We're not all these countries that are fighting because of the military industry wanting to sell weapons. And they create these wars to sell weapons. That cannot be fought. The only way to fight that is by giving people alternatives to live better and not even think about the purchasing of these things. And they'll get obsolete. Who's going to buy junk when we need to feed and be happy?
Oh, beautiful, Edward, the future scenarios that you're also painting us. And how we can get there and what role the UN can play with this. And we're running out of time, and I know you're busy regenerating Costa Rica and the rest of the world. But can I maybe just ask you one more question about the little step all of us could take to get started? Maybe a regenerative daily practice that would help us reconnect us with nature, with ourselves, with maybe a better future vision. If you have any advice for our listeners, where to get started,
The
please
most
tell.
critical thing is bringing life back. And insects are among the most critical group of species that can influence our future. And we're losing 1% of the insects every year, and we don't have too many left. So some of my students, I've had students in the UK, a school teacher, I told her, rewild your garden. And all the neighbors in that block came and, you look at this mess, look at how ugly. And after 3-4 months, when the butterflies were there and the bees were there, and then the birds started coming, the neighbor said, hey, that's not such a bad idea. After 3 months, all the block had regenerated. So we have programs where we regenerate urban spaces. Instead of having waste, garbage, organic garbage, you can convert it into compost, be it at your homes, be it a neighborhood composting facility. You get that compost and you put it in all the green areas. It's not the mowed lawn or the bare soil. No, all of these areas can actually start capturing carbon, but also capturing water. So the water does not flood the cities because it goes into the ground. So move away the cement, put nature back. It's not only trees. Grasses are very, very efficient, and all these weeds with the butterflies, you start creating conditions for the insects instead of spraying them, and the good insects will prevail. And as you have more insects, you'll have more birds, which have trouble now feeding because, especially the migratory birds, when they come from Africa, they don't find the food anymore. And we're losing birds so rapidly. We don't want to live in a silent planet. We won't be able to live in a silent planet, even if we're surrounded by a lot of materialistic stuff. So we can start just by thinking how I can make nature thrive in all of my actions and creating those conditions for life. A friend of mine, he was a mayor here. He turned his city, it's called now the Sweet City. You can look it up. He declared pollinators and earthworms citizens of the city and started planning accordingly. This was done 20 some years ago. I mean, it's not rocket science.
Beautiful. That's an incredible, inspirational suggestion you're making for all of us, and I'm inspired. I just want to go out now and plant wild flowers and reconnect with the nature around me. And I think we can all do it wherever we live. There's a opportunity to rewild this place in nature outside in the city on our balconies. I hope our listeners are inspired. We will put your university link in our show notes and other ways to get in touch with you. But is there anything else you would like our listeners to know about you, how they can get in touch with you or work with you, or any last thoughts from your side?
Our most successful program is a 10-month program called Certificate for Regenerative Entrepreneurship. Every single student, there are over 100 graduates. That was the first global program on regeneration. All of the people have gone through, from 60-year-olds to 20-year-olds, have changed their life, personal and professional. These are life-changing experiences. And all we do is give them the opportunity to listen to a Kate Rayworth, listen to an Alan Savory, listen to a Stuart Cohen from Buckminster Fuller Institute, and get inspired by all these people doing these fantastic. And then you say, wow, this is not in the textbooks. It's not in the peer-reviewed journals, but this is life-changing. And it's so easy. I can start today. So we don't need to go through a 7-year career to change. You just start looking around what's happening. And the good thing is we have all these are our friends now. And we're now building the Mycelium Learning Network. You can also Google that. That will be a global learning platform where we're bringing the biosphere reserves, we're bringing the restoration communities. So we'll have the bioregions that are actually doing regeneration connected to a whole global platform where we have teachers from around the world supporting this whole learning process, a learning community for creating solutions. This is how we can scale
Yeah.
it up.
I love this idea, and I hope all of us are going to join this global movement. And I would like to thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, the energy you shared. And I just wish you from the bottom of my heart most success with your endeavors and spreading hope and inspiration to all of us. Thank you, Edward.
My pleasure. Thank you for letting me do this.